Welcome to this episode of Extravagant Generosity, where we reflect on how the practice of generosity impacts our communities, touches our hearts, and works for a more just world. My name is Andrew Warner, Generosity Outreach Officer for the national setting, the United Church of Christ. I'm joined by my colleagues, Cindy Bailey and Jacqueline Owen.
Hello, everyone. I'm Cindy Bailey. I work at the National Office as the Director of the Office of Philanthropy, Technology, Identity, and Communication, sometimes referred to as OPTIC. And I work day in and day out with my colleagues, Andrew Warner and Jacqueline Owen. And I'm happy to be here this evening.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline Owen. I'm the Development Strategist for the United Church of Christ, and I supervise a team of 4 development professionals, and their role is to encourage generosity throughout our denomination.
Let's begin with some framing thoughts about generosity. The practice of generosity, like all of our spiritual practices, deepens the sense of hope, purpose, and meaning in our lives. Study after study reveals that the connection between generosity and a sense of well-being and happiness is quite strong. Consider how you feel when you have given of yourself for a worthy cause, whether you're giving of your time, your talent, or your treasure. Let me tell you a quick story. The national setting offers opportunity for staff members to perform a day of service in organizations throughout the city of Cleveland. This year I signed up to clean the parsonage of a church that was being prepared for use by a small grassroots arts organization. It was hot, dirty work, and some might say, well, quite unpleasant. I was there with one other volunteer from our staff in Optic, and together we scrubbed and soaked and mopped literally from the floors to the ceiling in the kitchen and the first floor living space throughout this century home that contained many architectural details that you really don't see that much these days. And after hours of laboring over buckets and cleaning supplies, we stood up, I got off the floor to find gleaming hardwoods, clean fixtures, baseboards, and walls. What an amazing accomplishment in a few hours. And the pain in my lower back was worth it. And when the time came later in the year, when I was asked to think about special mission offerings and other appeals, I remembered that day and gave what I could. If someone had asked me to give more, I very likely would have given more. I would have welcomed the ask, as a matter of fact. And these positive experiences and relationships we as people build with the places and the people that give spiritual meaning to our lives are priceless. The connection to the divine that our churches, pastors, and leaders facilitate are some of the most meaningful connections any of us experience throughout our lives. Most of us want to give back and dig deep to make sure that future generations have access to the same church experiences that we have had. But we find ourselves in strange times, and during this pandemic, we need to be prudent and engage in social distancing, which doesn't come naturally to some of us. At the same time, we are facing increased anxiety, fear, and weariness. David Brooks, who some of you might know, recently spoke to the way pandemics can cause social distrust. And we already see how pandemic fears can reinforce isolation and xenophobia. Your call to generosity for your setting can be part of the response to those things. For instance, you could ask givers to support your setting to address the needs caused by the pandemic, continue pastoral care for the most needy among us in these times, witness to the fact that social distancing doesn't mean social distrust, and provide a meaningful way for people to make a difference in the lives of others. And finally, ensure the continuity of a church that connects disciples to one another and to the divine. As leaders of local congregations, we encourage you to think through practical ways to engage your community in generosity right now during this very unusual season. And I'm joined by Jacqueline and Andrew, who are going to lead us through some practical steps that you can take to do just that. So I'm going to turn it back to them. Thanks.
So as we know, no one solution will work for every congregation. So we want to lift up 4 ideas that may be useful for your congregation to implement. Number 1, we'll talk about mail-in donations. Number 2, auto bill pay. Number 3, online giving. And 4, encouraging your donors to give earlier in the year. And to give us further details about these 4 options, I'll turn this over to Andrew.
Thank you, Jacqueline. So one of the first and most basic ways that we can encourage people to give in this time is that they can mail in their donations. You know, almost every church sees the vast majority of its funds coming in through the Sunday morning offering plate, which presents a problem when we're not together physically. But what we can do is to encourage our members and friends to make their gifts by just mailing in their gift, mailing in their check. As we do that, we want to think through the kinds of experiences that they have on Sunday morning. When they gather for Sunday morning, they have an intense and wonderful experience of our congregation at its best. They hear the stories about our impact. And so because of that, we want to find ways to not only ask them to mail in their check, but to make sure they continue to have those experiences of participation and impact. So you might consider inviting your members as they mail in a check to say a prayer of dedication over the envelope. You can provide that prayer of dedication to each of your members. You might want to look at ways to mail out through snail mail a copy of a pastoral prayer that you're offering that week, or a story of hope and encouragement that you want to share with your congregation. Be sure to include a return envelope so they can respond with a gift to support the church. You may also consider having people in your congregation record a testimonial. They can do so on their smartphone, record a video testimonial, upload it to YouTube, and then email that out to people in your congregation, telling the story of how their lives have been touched and changed because of the work that your congregation does in its community. In short, you want to do 2 things. You want to invite regular giving, invite people to mail in those checks, and find new ways to regularly tell the story of your congregation.
Andrew, thank you for those great tips about mailing in donations. I think you shedded some new light on what we do pretty much every Sunday. Would you like to move on to point number 2?
So I also want to talk about the opportunity to do auto bill pay. Many of us may be familiar with that for signing up for the gas company or the electric company to have a payment automatically taken out of our bank account. We can do the same thing with our donations. If you go to your bank's website, or if you go into the local branch of your bank, you can set up an automatic payment from your checking account or your savings account to go to the charity or the congregation that you want to support. It's a great way for your members and friends who may be unsure about online giving to continue to give regularly to your church. It can be a one-time gift, or it can be a reoccurring monthly gift. But again, auto bill pay can be a great option for some of our church members and friends.
Another excellent idea. What are you suggesting for the 3rd option?
So third, I would really recommend that churches look to go to online giving. Many of our UCC congregations already provide for a way for people to make an online gift. And those congregations want to make sure that they're just including that option in all of the communication that's coming out at this time. So the email communication from churches, their Facebook page, their Instagram, all of their venues, they want to make sure that they're including a way to make an online gift. But many of our congregations are looking to do online giving for the first time. So I would begin, if you're in that situation, looking to add online giving to what you can do, I'd recommend that you first look to see if there's an online gift vendor that matches with your database. Many of the databases that we use in our churches provide a vendor that integrates directly with that database. So for instance, when I was a pastor, my church used a database called Realm that partnered with a company called Vanco for online giving. And it made it possible for me to offer online giving with just a few clicks on the dashboard for the program. But if you're picking an online giving vendor for the first time, I want you to know that there's many good options that exist, and you can find one that's right, that's just right for your church. Online, each vendor will offer a slightly different bundle of features at different price points. Typically, congregations pay 2 kinds of fees: a monthly flat rate and an additional charge per transaction. I'm going to share a list of what those fees look like and what those options are. So you can see that there's a wide variety in what the fees are and the charges. So there's some options that charge no monthly fee, but they charge typically higher transaction costs. There's others that charge no transaction fees, but have a monthly fee. So we want to look at the volume of gifts that you might receive and the number of transactions that you might have to identify which one might be the best cost point for you. Each of these options also offers a different kind of user experience in terms of the form that people might be filling out. If this is the very first online giving opportunity that you're creating for your congregation, you might want to consider a program like PayPal, which will feel more familiar to people from other online shopping experiences and might be a more familiar form. Many of these organizations, vendors provide ways to customize the online form so that you can customize it just for your church, including the colors of your congregation that they use, including a logo, and really making it feel integral to your website and the online experience that you want your members to have. Again, you can spend some time with each of these vendors. There's an option that will work for every single of our UCC congregations. A number of these options are easy to implement. I think you should budget between 15 minutes and an hour to set up your online giving program. You'll want to have on hand your EIN, that's your employee identification number. It's a number assigned by the IRS to each employer in the country. You'll want that EIN number, your bank routing number, and your bank account number as information to have on hand when you set this up. I'd suggest that you make sure that you have 2 people that have access to the online vendor, 2 people that can log in and see what's going on in the activity in the account. That's a good check to have in your process around risk management. Just as we might have 2 people count the offering on a Sunday morning, we want to have 2 people that can see the online gifts that are coming into the congregation. Another online option that exists is Facebook, and Facebook offers a way to host fundraising events and lift up causes. And you can easily set up a Facebook fundraising page, either as through the pastor's page or better through the Facebook page of the congregation. I want to share with you an example of how one congregation did that. So this is a congregation, UCC congregation called New Creation UCC. They created a virtual offering plate for their congregation. You see they're in the midst of raising funds for their congregation. They hope to raise $2,000. They're a quarter of the way there. We hope that they meet their goal. But what I love is the creativity and the ingenuity of saying, hey, we'd normally have a Sunday morning offering. We want to have an offering on Facebook. You might also consider this for an event in your congregation. So many churches have planned spring concerts or youth group fundraisers that have had to be canceled because we're not gathering in large groups. Why not have a virtual fundraiser, turn that event into a virtual fundraiser on Facebook for your congregation? Lots of options here for you to play with and try.
Andrew, I'm so impressed with your expertise with online giving and the different platforms. Very impressive. If you could share the last point with our viewers.
Sure. The last observation I would make is that many of our congregations have donors that make a gift once a year. I know personally that's how my spouse and I like to do our giving. We like to do our giving in December, and many other people are like that as well. December is the biggest month for donations. But that, I think, is going to present a challenge to many of our congregations this year, because this crisis is challenging us in terms of our cash flow. It's kind of interrupted the normal flow of our income and expenses. Some of us are taking on additional expenses as we adapt new technologies and new ways of gathering. So I think there's a real opportunity to reach out to those people who love your congregation and typically give one gift a year, and to ask them to make that gift in April or May. It gives them a chance to know that their gift is going to be valued whenever it comes in, but that it's particularly important for the church to receive it in this season of crisis. With all of our donors, I think we want to make sure that we are sending a thank you. So no matter how someone gives to your church, whether they mail in a check or auto bill pay or online or giving once a year, we want to make sure that we're thanking them. And one of the ways that your church can do that is to send a quarterly thank you letter. I hope that you already do that, but if you don't, this is the time to begin. So what you want to do is to write a letter that lifts up the good work that your congregation is doing, and the ways in which you're changing people's lives. We want to acknowledge the social strain that distancing has created for all of us, and name the ways that the church will continue to gather online and through other communication. We want to use that letter to thank people for their donations during the first 3 months of the year, remind them of their pledge if they made one, and invite them to give as they can in the next month or two. In that way, and of course you want to include a return envelope. So in this way, the quarterly letter thanks people for helping the church, acknowledges what the church is doing on their behalf, the way it's having an impact in the community, and invites them to make another gift to support your good work.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Jacqueline. To wrap up, throughout this conversation, we focused on practical tips your congregation can take regarding the offerings that support your work. And these practical steps matter, and if implemented quickly, can really help congregations to shore up the offerings in a virtual environment. I also want to remind you of something we sometimes forget in the midst of a crisis. People will support your ministry because the work you do matters. It matters deeply to people. Our faith is about more than buildings, so even if we must be apart from one another, we can still connect, inspire, support, care, and love each other. Social distance does not mean spiritual separation by any means. Together we can find ways to hold each other's hearts. In time, our doors will open again, and we will reach out with the extravagant welcome that we are known for. If you have questions in the meantime, we invite you to send them to us by email at giving@ucc.org. Thank you again, Andrew and Jacqueline, and thank you for listening.